Now, I want to share with you a call I had with a client of mine. It was with a big SaaS company with multiple different teams, sales, marketing, RevOps. They're all using HubSpot. They're all using one system. And the funny thing is that they were all miserable. Now, I walked in expecting it was a systems problem, like the tool itself was the issue. But what I found was something very different, and this might surprise a lot of you. Marketing was blaming sales for the quality of their leads. It was terrible, according to them. And then sales was blaming RevOps for bad data. RevOps was then blaming marketing for not tagging the companies and attributing them correctly. So everyone had a list of things the other person is at fault of doing. Right? Everyone had a complaint, and everyone just wanted us to fix their specific thing first. Now, this is not uncommon that we get brought into a client portal, and the very first thing they do is hand us a wish list, a big piece of documentation with 4,700 things that are broken and what's wrong, and these are the things, a list of demands that they want to get fixed. Priority 1 to 1,470. Okay, all of them are listed as high priority number 1, and this is where new project managers would freeze up, right? They get a bit worried because they get overwhelmed. They were trained thus far to solve problems, and now there are just too many problems to solve. So what are we going to do here? So they do one of two things. They actually try to tackle everything at once, which honestly goes nowhere, or they wait for someone senior to tell them where to start. Okay? The second one is the real problem, because waiting to be told what to do is exactly what project managers should eventually stop doing. Okay, I've been there before, so I know what this moment feels like, and it is overwhelming. But over the 4 years that I've been doing this for real clients, I started to understand something that really changed the way I look at these complicated problems. It changed the way how I view and operate when facing these complications. Now, what I see here constantly with HubSpot specialists who are trying to move up the ladder here is they get into a client engagement, they open up the portal, they audit their workflows, check the properties, and they find everything that is technically wrong, and they too build their own list. Then they present the list, and then they wait for approval to fix that list. And then they wonder why they're still being treated as someone who's merely just an executor and not someone who's actually coming from a strategic standpoint. Because here's why. A list of problems is not a strategy, right? Presenting problems back to a client who already knows that they have problems does not make you a strategic lead, unfortunately. It just makes you a very organized specialist or a support person, right? So the real job of a project manager is to walk into chaos and give the business one clear direction to move towards. One direction, okay? That's it. And it has most of the time nothing to do with how well you know the tool itself. The core principle is that a solution presented without a diagnosis is just a pitch. A solution presented after diagnosis becomes a recommendation, and the client responds to that very differently. There is one job that you need to do in the strategy call. It is to apply strength to the most promising opportunity. It is not to cover everything. It is not to demonstrate how much you know, not to walk through a list. You will find one place where focused effort will produce the most meaningful result, and committing to it. When approaching this project, I had my senior project manager with me on this engagement, and we have done all the groundwork, right? We have done discovery calls with all of the departments. We consolidated a kickoff session. We did 2 to 3 weeks of prep, and when we sat down for the client presentation to basically present our scope of works, we showcased a board, a Miro board, full of notes from all of these different calls, all of the problems that each department kind of brought up. They're all real, they're all valid, they're all legitimate problems that the businesses need to fix. But I looked at it and I asked one simple question. What is the one thing that if we fix first makes everything else easier and completely irrelevant? That's it. That's the question. That is the job. So when you're looking at a mess like that, there's always a root cause that's sitting underneath everything else. And in this particular case, we kept hearing the same thing from every department, each of them using different words, but they all just mean the same thing, which is I cannot trust the data, which is where we decided to start at. So we actually walked the client through a mirror. The conflicts that has been surfaced across teams, repeating patterns, the finger pointing, only after the client can see that their own problems reflected back do we actually then present the game plan. Because we don't just want to shove the solution down our client's throat. We actually want to showcase to them that we truly understand and have full ownership of their current reality. Then that relationship now shifts between yourself and the client as a vendor to a diagnostician. This is where true trust really begins. Everything else that was been stipulated on that board, right? The lead scoring, the sequences, the dashboards, duplicates, whatever it is, building any of those things without fixing the underlying foundations first would be as though you are renovating a house that was built on sand, right? You build it, it's great, you finished it, it looks good, but then it eventually crumbles. Now, this is what project managers typically tend to do. They see a full list of problems and they think to themselves, well, look, the client is paying for results, right? So, and the more results I give, there's more volume. So then the more I deliver, the more valuable I look. All right, I get it, right? That thinking makes sense. But saying yes to everything means nothing gets done properly. You essentially dilute your focus and you create this illusion of progress without having any substance. And then 3 months later, the client looks at what was delivered and says, we're still stuck in the same place. What happens? What happened? And I watched this over and over again, and that's a failure of strategy, not just the execution. So the funny thing here is that we actually we cut down these deliverables and we stay crystal clear on what the focus objectives actually are. We make a clear list of what it is that we're going to do, and most importantly, a clear list of what we're deliberately not going to do. And we tell the client exactly why. And in that moment, being willing to cut out things and being able to defend the reason for why you're cutting something is the moment that the room starts to see you differently. So in practice, have a clear not in scope section in every scope presentation. Frame these exclusions as a strategic choice, not because you can't do it. Always provide the reasoning. We can't do this because if we do, we forget about that. Offer a path forward. We'll stay focused on the objective here and we'll solve that second part later on. So this works because this sequence of splitting out the objectives is the strategy in itself. When clients understand that phase 2 can't happen without phase 1, they stop trying to skip ahead and the plan becomes self-defending. Now, this is the specific moment here that in every client engagement, this separates the people who get treated as simply operators from people who actually get treated as strategic leads. And you'll feel it in the room. And it's not a deliverable. It is the way that the plan is being communicated and the amount of thought that goes into actually coming up with the plan in the first place. So when you're running the room, your job is to keep the conversation moving towards a particular decision. Clients would ask all sorts of tangent questions that bring up things that matter to them in the moment, but does not actually serve the overall objective. And your job here is to hold that thread, that single line of focus, without making them feel like you're dismissing the line of thought. Now, there's another point here that I do want to mention as well. Do not be afraid to walk back on a particular idea that you have initially perhaps said or mentioned, but then after deeper discovery, you realize that it probably is not in the best interest of the client. Because there was a specific feature that I genuinely wanted to include in the scope. I was very excited about it when I first heard about their problems, and I thought that this would be a solve. I was genuinely excited about it since the beginning of the engagement. But after going through those calls, I reflected upon it, and after seeing how the team was actually operating, I made a call. And my call was, I took it out. Okay? Killing your own ideas when the data says to is the single highest trust move available in a client relationship. If something that you were excited turns out after scoping that it does not serve the client's current situation, say so and admit it publicly. Name the excitement, name the reversal, and name the reason why. Being able to override your own enthusiasm for their benefit is a signal that almost no vendor ever sends. This proves that you're working for their outcome, not for your deliverable list. So I sat in front of the client and I said, we're not doing this, here is why, and this is what we're going to be doing instead. Being willing to cut something you really wanted to do because the client needs something different, that is the shift, and that's what a strategic lead does. I want to be honest about something. Earlier in my career, I thought strategy was about knowing more HubSpot features, more integration features, more tech, more certifications, more credentials. And the more I knew, the more strategic I would be. But that's not what strategy is. Strategy is prioritization under constraint, looking at 10 things that all seem to matter and saying only 3 of these actually matters right now. Then defending that position with clarity and confidence while everyone else in the room is nervous about the 7 other things that's being left behind. Most HubSpot specialists have never been trained to do that. The certifications don't teach it. The platform courses don't teach it. You learn it by sitting in rooms with real clients who have real pressure and real stakes. You learn it from someone who has been in these rooms before. Now, towards the end of that call, I actually said something simple, that a mistake would be for us to pursue multiple objectives that are unconnected with each other, or worse, that conflict with each other. So what we are proposing here instead is what we believe is the most effective path forward in the next 12 weeks or the duration of the project. Because the client had spent months watching their internal teams pursue conflicting objectives and getting nowhere. That's their current reality right now. And so we called it out directly without actually making anyone in particular feel blamed for it. Naming the problem clearly is half of strategy. And the other half is the confidence to commit to one direction when everyone else in the room is hoping you would say yes to everything else. And when you do that, the conversations change, your rates change, and introductions change. Now, I'm not sharing this with you to show you how a client call works. That's not the actual point here. I'm sharing this portion and this mindset with you because I talk to HubSpot specialists every week who know the platform through and through. They can build workflows, they can configure pipelines, they can pull reports, segment their lists, set up their properties. They're generally capable people, but we still tend to get lost when we are faced with complex situations, and that's very normal. Knowing a system like HubSpot, for example, well, is a good foundation, but knowing what to do with it and being able to walk into the room full of stressed, conflicted stakeholders and give them one clear direction to move in, that is a completely different skill set. And that last part there is actually the job, and most people were just never shown the path. And this is why I built Made for This, a community where we have real engagements, real decisions, real life examples from case studies, showcasing real client dynamics and the skill of operating at a strategic level instead of a real business. So if you have been wondering why your HubSpot knowledge is not translating into the roles or rates that you think that you should, this is probably why. You were never behind, you were just never shown what the job actually requires. So if you want to see how this looks like in practice, click down below, join us in the community, and I'll see you in the next one.